today to Zoom hui on the Museum Hardship Fund. And today we have Victoria Essen from National Services Te Paerangi, who most of you will know. And we also have with us today Sebastian Clark from the Ministry for Culture and Heritage. And he will be here to potentially answer some questions later on. But first of all, I'm sure you all know Victoria and are aware of the Museum Hardship Fund, which is part of the COVID-19 government response to help the recovery of the arts, culture and heritage in this weird and crazy time that we find ourselves in. So without any more from me, I'm going to hand over to Victoria to do an introduction to the fund and how it's going to work. So over to you, Victoria.
Thanks, Philippa. Well, kia ora koutou. Just first of all, I'd really like to acknowledge our Auckland colleagues who are, of course, dealing with the level 3 COVID-19 conditions, while the rest of us are in level 2, and also acknowledging those north of Auckland who have effectively been cut off as well. And I've just, at the same time, aware that, of course, we're missing the 1 o'clock briefing, and I'm just keeping one eye on that as we were signing into here and see that there have been some new cases and that they will not be changing the levels at this stage, which I guess is what we might have anticipated. So yeah, I just really want to acknowledge those of you who are part of this hui, who are dealing with that new situation, and of course those of our colleagues who are not here but nevertheless have been affected. But yeah, we have all been affected in some way by COVID-19, and today we're here to talk about the Museum Hardship Fund, which was part of the Budget 2020 response to that. And our colleagues at Manatū Taonga, Ministry for Culture and Heritage, talked to us quite early on around the impacts and ways that the sector might be supported. One of the initiatives was this fund, and is quite, I guess, compared to some of the other much larger funding channels, quite a neat and tidy fund, and was handed to National Services Te Paerangi to be able to work with sector to develop the settings and then to administer. So we've worked hard to be able to make this accessible. And I thought, first of all, I thought I'd talk about the process that we've been going through in the last few weeks, and then kind of move into some of the more specific information, which we will be sharing more broadly with the sector on Monday and then subsequently through the week. So first of all, we started off by pulling together a reference group to help us, because of course right at the very beginning when we first talked about this, we knew immediately that this had to be informed by the sector and driven by organisations that were impacted, and also by those that had you know, great understanding of and experience of the cultural organisations across the country. So we ended with 16 fabulous colleagues who responded with generosity and speed to my call for assistance, and I'm very grateful for them for their amazing response. We pulled together a range of people who were based from one end of the country to the other, that had a variety of interests, perspectives, but all who had a great deal of experience in the sector, and who gave us some very well considered views. We ran everything remotely, right up until the end, where we did have some people in a meeting and then others zooming in, which was a bit of a challenge, but anyway. And so that was added some complexity to the process, but nevertheless we had some really great conversations. So we had quite a number of quite long Zoom hui, and then subsequent email check-ins and processes by which people could give their preference. So we ended up with an initial framework, which then with the help of Sebastian, who is here, we shaped into a briefing for the responsible minister, who's Honourable Grant Robinson, as his portfolio as Associate Minister for Culture and Heritage. He was happy with the initial direction, and then we went back to the reference group for more detail. So the whole way along, the ministry has been supporting us in the processes of making sure that we're doing everything that we need to keep the minister informed. So that's been really good to have that support, and of course the process to make sure that that the minister is happy with the approach that we're taking. So I might just hand over to Seb at this stage to add any other comments around the role of the ministry during this process.
Thanks, Victoria. Yeah, not a huge amount additional to comment at this point, but I think, yeah, it's just worth recognising that this is one of a number of new initiatives that the ministry has secured through the Budget 2020 process, and this was an example of an initiative that we recognised was best administered through one of our funded agencies. So went immediately to Te Papa to sort of lead the development, and we've been supporting Victoria in that process to date.
Okay, so I'll go on to the guts, if you like. Okay, so we have $2 million over 2 years, so it's not a huge amount of money. We know that it won't fix everything and it won't solve all the problems. The way that I keep thinking of it is that we're kind of fixing some of the most critical gaps that have appeared, but we're not going to be rebuilding the dam. So some key information for you is that you will be able to apply up to a figure of up to 25,000 per organisation per annum. The organisations that will be welcoming applications from are community-run and volunteer museums and galleries, iwi, hapa and whānau, Manatū Taonga, and small to medium-sized museum galleries and cultural organisations who care for taonga and collections. It's quite a broad funnel. So that was actually one of the analogies that we used in the reference group, was to think of it as a funnel. So at the top quite wide, and then we narrowed down to making sure that the next part of the criteria, which is around the impact of COVID-19 has affected those organisations. You must be a legally constituted non-profit organisation and have incorporated status, be an incorporated society or charitable trust, or be applying through an iwi organisation. Righty ho. So so what we will be supporting, or the areas that will be focused on, are areas where organisations have been directly impacted by COVID-19. So compensation for hardship. This will be demonstrated primarily through loss of income, but may also be demonstrated by other means, such as loss of ability to access and care for collections, and loss of ability to be able to put public programming in place, including exhibitions. The sorts of areas that might be supported in this area of compensation for hardship will be things such as rent, security costs, heating, insurance, and other ongoing operational bills. contribution of wages for key staff, services of tradespeople for critical maintenance of infrastructure, and the purchase of materials that support best practice collections, care and preventative conservation. The next area that we focused in on, recognising that there's been impact in a much broader sense, is around that sustainable practice. So it can also be applied to the development of planning and policy documentation for more effective and efficient museum operations. Lots of organisations have had to pivot and shift focus. Strategic review, the reset operational arrangements in the post-COVID environment. The development of promotion and marketing strategy and materials, where again there's had to be a focus on different audiences. Review of current online offer and the development of strategy to enhance and reach new audiences that way. And similarly, within an education context, the development of strategy and resources. Also at the governance level as well. Okay, so what we are not going to be supporting via this fund, and I guess recognising within that quantum, is capital projects or capital items. That includes seed funding for building projects within that major redevelopment space. And any one single item that exceeds $1,000 in cost. So I mean, there's some specifics within that, but you know, you get the gist. Okay, so in terms of organisations who would not be considered eligible, those that of course are private organisations and or collections that don't have charitable status, and the large metro museums and galleries. The other thing that we did was that we kind of tried to think about some sorts of scenarios or situations where museums may be wanting to access the funding. So I thought it might be helpful to talk about those because it starts to put some kind of context, if you like, around the direction that we've tried to take this. So kinds of case studies, if you like. So the first one I can give you is, imagine that you have a gallery or museum that they've just received their insurance bill for the year ahead, and also they've made an estimate of their power costs for the next 6 months. So that's those kinds of fixed costs that you know are going to be coming in, the bills that have to be paid. They've had a really big impact on their income, which was largely reliant on admissions. So they're going to be applying for the bills that are there to be paid immediately, and for those that have been estimated into the future. The next scenario is, say, a museum is paying rent on an off-site store to house collections, and their rent on that space and the security bill is now due. Their regional council has reduced their funding as a result of COVID-19, and they're making application to be able to keep paying rent on that storage and make sure that it's secure. Another situation is where a gallery decides they want to undertake a conservation survey of the collection because there's been some deterioration in pest activity that went undetected during the COVID-19 level restrictions. They've now been noticed, and they want to put a new collections care process in place and plan for an upgrade of their storage areas. They're applying for providers to give them a forward strategy and how they might do their work. Their local sponsors that they would normally go to for a project of this size have suspended their grant giving for the time being, so they're applying for funding. Another scenario, a hapu has just hired someone to work on cataloguing of whakapapa files, those that are held at their local iwi runanga office. We're doing that to enable better access to the information. They were planning to hold a series of events to pay for the Kaimahi wages, and all of their planned activities have had to be cancelled due to the restrictions. They have got evidence of their past fundraising events that were really successful. They've run a craft market, that kind of thing, and they can easily demonstrate where the opportunity cost has occurred. They're applying for a portion of the wages. A museum has decided that they don't have an adequate framework for governance, and they're questioning their sustainability in these uncertain times. They want to get a contractor in to look at their whole museum operation to make sure that it's robust and sustainable into the future, and to set strategy for the next 1 to 3 years. They'd like some assistance to clearly define that future direction. A gallery has a past part-time staff member who cares for collections. A significant part of their role is responding to inquiries about the collection and making them available to researchers and locals. The organisation is in a traditionally high tourism area, and they've always been funded their activities through tapping into that audience, through tours, etc. Of course, those aren't happening anymore. They've applied for the wage subsidy for their person, but that has now come to an end, and so they're in a position where they're applying for wages for that person. So you can see we've tried to think of a kind of a range of circumstances and situations that would be eligible for the funding. The fund will be open, all situations going the way that we would like them to, next week. We're aiming for Thursday or Friday. The fund will be open for applications for a period of 1 month. We're just in the process of finalising the application form, but it's not onerous. It would, asks you the things that you would normally expect within an application form. The way that you would demonstrate the impact of the COVID-19 situation is quite open and quite broad. So it just asks you to write a statement on the impact of COVID-19 restrictions, asking you to include the sorts of things like a portion of your operational budget, projected ongoing consequences of the organisation's financial sustainability, etc., etc. So it's quite open, and will be asking you to be able to demonstrate those things in a way that is suitable for your organisation. And then it will ask you to give an overview of how you will use the grant, and where how much the shortfall is for you, etc. So it's not, like I say, it's not too onerous. We are going to be in the selection process. So after the fund is closed, so again, it'll be open for a period of 4 weeks, and we will be there to help you in that process as well. Then we'll, of course, assess, make sure that you've got all the information that you need within the application. And then we'll be asking a panel of external reviewers to come and help us with the assessment of those applications. And they'll be assessed against the criteria, which we talked about earlier, but of course it'll all be documented and will be able to be accessed through the Te Papa website. But the sorts of things that those assessors will be looking for will be demonstrated loss of income, including hardship experienced as a proportion of operating budget, demonstrated diminished public program potential, diminished level of care for collections and public access, diminished potential and actual loss of key staff, explanation of how organisational sustainability is at risk, and reasonable proof that you have been unable to source funding through other means. So that process of assessment we're anticipating will take, by the time we make sure that we've got all of the documentation and then have the opportunity for the assessors to review the applications and then come together to have a discussion, we're wanting that all to happen within a 4-week period as well, so that from the time of the applications closing to the time that you know that you have your funding would be no more than 5 weeks in total. Once that is occurred and you've been successful in your application, then you enter into a contract with us, which highlights as part of your application how you'll spend the money and also what the reporting requirements will be. At this stage, we're working with the Ministry of Culture and Heritage again to make sure that we're recording the sorts of information that are going to be helpful for us into the future to be able to demonstrate the real benefit of this funding, both at the moment of fixing those gaps, but then also maybe looking at the legacy and benefit of that investment. Will mean that there will be a report at 6 months and then one at 12 months. And then again, we'll be able to help you with that process. Right in the process at the moment of being able to recruit for a funding advisor whose role will be specifically to work on this fund and assist organisations with their process of perhaps not application for this very first round, because they probably won't be in place, but certainly the reporting aspects. So it's all quite a lot of information and talking. So, and there may have been some comments coming through. So I'll hand it over now to see whether, Seb, do you have anything to add, and or has anybody got any questions?
Thank you, Victoria. Just a reminder, please do put your questions into the chat. There were only a minor clarification so far, so please do include your questions. Perhaps, Victoria, we could just quickly go back to that eligibility. You talked about a range of different organisations and that it's not available to the major metropolitan institutions, but it is available to smaller organisations that can show some charitable and public-facing status. What about organisations that might be a unit of a local council, for instance? Are they eligible, do you think?
Yes, they would be, yeah. So we've said small to medium-sized organisations, recognising that a number of those organisations that are supported by their local councils have had significant reductions to their funding through this time.
So when you talk about size, do you have any criteria on that, or is it just sort of a relative assessment?
Well, my only thinking about that is that the large metropolitan museums are those that are based in Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch and Dunedin, and the large organisations in those places would be the only ones who wouldn't be eligible.
Okay, so you don't have an upper limit on size according to staffing or something like that?
No.
Okay, so it's intended for anything from a volunteer organisation through to a regional institution?
Yeah.
Okay. You talked about what other funds might be available, and I know, for instance, that there's some business advisory funds available through regional tourism, through some of the chambers of commerce networks and various other sources. Do people have to have applied for that first? How are you going to look at that kind of relativity of availability of funds?
What we will be asking people to do is indicate where they have applied for other funding and where they may have been successful in that. But we're not making it a prerequisite. So, you know, you don't have to have applied before you can apply to the Museum Hardship Fund. So we wouldn't be considering ourselves to be a fund of last resort, but recognising that we have a limited amount of money, and the amount that you can apply for is certainly not going to fix all of your problems. So I guess that, you know, indicates a little bit for the fact that we would anticipate that organisations can apply for this and may still be eligible for funding to some of the other funds that might come through Manatū Taonga, or through their local councils, for example.
So in terms of that kind of additional support, there could be some complementary work there, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I guess, you know, where you might have had, you know, a substantial amount of money that might have come through a different funding source, then of course, you know, weighing that up against other organisations that have had no support, then, you know, you can see that would, you know, because it's contestable, you can see where the assessors may decide this one is more at need than this one.
So, for instance, would organisations that have already received some funding, perhaps through the Strategic Tourism Assets Protection Program or other funds, wouldn't be ineligible though, because this is for a different purpose? I'm just trying to figure this out as we talk.
I think it's really around that quantum too, the amount that's been received. So where, yeah, there might have been some, you know, significant funding that's come from another source, like the Strategic Tourism Asset Protection Program Fund, then again, weighed up against another organisation that has had no funding, we would be supporting that organisation that hasn't had the funding. Yeah.
Is there going to be perhaps a place on the application form then to say what other funding has been already received or applied for?
Yes, there is. Yeah.
And so it's a matter of demonstrating a new or a different need from that which has already been.
Yeah, that's
identified. Right. Somebody has suggested that there has been a new Beehive announcement today on a new lottery fund which includes heritage. I wonder, perhaps Sebastian, do you know anything about that you could help us with? If you don't, I understand, because I don't know about it myself.
Yeah, I probably need to do a bit more research before I can speak on in any confidence about that one. Yeah, new to me as well.
Or we can invite them along to the 11th hui, and get them to talk about that.
Yes, that's a good point. As we said, there will be another hui on the 11th of September, and at that point we will be looking at some of the other funds that are available, such as the larger funds through the Ministry for Culture and Heritage. So I'm just looking at the questions here in terms of what might be covered by this fund, what kinds of projects or applications of the funding. Would something which actually is going to increase access to the collection, for instance, a digital or internet capacity project, be eligible?
Yep. Building a whole new website, no, because that's a capital asset, but increasing access, yep.
So it would be that would be a kind of a skills development or capacity building project.
Yeah, and I guess always keeping in mind that there is the capability funding stream that's in development as well. So good about thinking about things that, you know, might not be able to be supported in other ways. The other thing to note too is that we will still keep our other funding streams operating, the NSTP streams, so like the HHG, the Helping Hands grants, the travel subsidies, although not so much travelling going on at the moment, and the professional development grant funds. And if you apply for those and are successful, that's cool. That doesn't affect your ability to apply to this one. So this is seen as complementary rather than replacing. Oh, I see Andrea's just put a link to the lotteries announcement. Thanks, Andrea.
Yes, I was just going to mention that, so that we'll all be looking at that with great interest.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I didn't know about that.
Victoria, one of the scenarios that you described talked about some strategic advice and planning and developing new ways of working. How will NSTP be able to help people to find perhaps suitable consultants or advisors to do that work?
Yeah, which is part of what we do already. You know, we have to be careful in that we're a government organisation, so we can't go just use this person. So we generally give, you know, a range of options for people, and say, you know, here's some people that we know are really good at this work, and I'm constantly putting out feelers to people in the sector saying, hey, do you do this kind of work? You know, so yeah, we've got a little bit of a bank of consultants and contractors who we know are really excellent and do great work. And we point you into.
All right for someone to suggest someone locally that they might have worked with before.
Yeah, absolutely. And do that, you know, through the Museum Development Advisor or directly with me, yeah, up to you. But yeah, we do definitely keep our feelers out looking for those people, because actually there's, you know, there are not huge number, so it is always good to know if there's any new players that have contributed really positively. Please let us know.
You mentioned the Museum Development Advisors, Sally and Judith and Paula.
Yeah.
What's their role going to be during this process? How available are they going to be to help people with their applications?
Well, right at the moment, before we've got our funding advisor position in place, they are going to be that first point of call for, you know, making that the fit with your organisation and the initiative or project that you have in mind for the application. We do suggest that you talk directly to them to get that first steer of like, yep, you're in the ballpark, or maybe if you know, focus a little bit more in this direction, it'll be better. So they are aware that they will be the first point of contact for this first round. And yeah, so that's the situation that it is at the moment. And of course, you know, because people have already got, you know, great relationships with those people, you certainly, you know, I'd encourage you to have a chat and talk through, you know, your situation, just so that they can give you some advice about how to shape things.
Yes, and that will be a fairly busy 4-week period then, from the week after next through to the end of September, as people scramble to get their applications in.
Yeah.
You mentioned there will be 2 rounds each year.
Yeah,
so,
that's what we're, or more, depending on what the response is. We're being a little bit open-ended about that, just so that we can be responsive. But yeah, we anticipate a minimum of 2, might be 3. So first one, yeah, opening at the end of next week, you know, barring some other major thing. And then I would anticipate that the next one might be around March.
So is there going to be a place in the application for people to make a statement about urgency then? Because if there are more than 1 round in a year and there are 4 or more over 2 years, then presumably people will be able to apply more than once.
Also, if you get, you know, if you apply in the first round but are unsuccessful, you could apply in the second round. Is that what you meant?
Or if you apply in the first round and you are successful, can you apply again?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So once you've got your allocation for the financial year, no, but in the new financial year, it's a clean slate, and yes, you can apply again.
And the limit for any one application is $25,000.
Yeah.
Will you be, do you anticipate that you potentially will be allocating smaller amounts in some cases?
Yeah, because, you know, for some organisations, the need may not be to that size, particularly for the much smaller organisations where, you know, there are, you know, immediate crack in the dam may only be, you know, 5,000. And then once that's fixed, then they're in a position where they can keep operating. So I am anticipating a range of costs, as we do with our Helping Hands grants as well. You know, of course, that's a much smaller amount, but we do get a variety of amounts that come through in that round.
So in that case, do you anticipate allocating, say, $500,000 or up to $500,000 in this first round, or potentially more than that?
Well, we'll have to be able to see what we get with the applications, but yeah, that's and hopefully it'll neatly fall like that. But you never know. It may be that, you know, organisations may take a wee while to get themselves in a position where they can apply as well. Some organisations have indicated to us, and, you know, and also the information that we've seen through the really helpful surveys that you've done, Philippa, is that, you know, that their financial situation is okay now, but they know that there are restrictions coming. So, so yeah, I don't think there'll be everybody making application in this first round, but there may be some that come later.
Yes, that certainly has come through. The feedback that we've been getting is that some people are feeling kind of they can get through as long as this current situation doesn't go on indefinitely, but the longer we stay in level 2 or 3, the more difficult things might become.
Yeah, that's right.
So there is a large degree of uncertainty.
Yeah, and the other thing to note too is that the fund will be, you know, ring-fenced as a special purpose fund. So any unspent funds in the first financial year will get swept through into the second financial year. So if for whatever reason we don't allocate that full $1 million in this current financial year, of course, which we're, you know, charging through to great rate of knots. I can't believe it's nearly the end of August. You know, that'll just pull through to the next year, which would mean that there'll be more money to allocate at a point where, you know, maybe more organisations are in need.
So in terms of actually making the applications,
yeah.
the people who are applying, do they need to be the directors, the committees, the boards, whoever? Is this going to require, you know, official approval? And how onerous and how formal is the application process?
We do have quite a sort of a scary disclaimer at the end of it, which has got lots of, you know, blah, blah, blah in it. But really, it's anybody in the organisation that's authorised to make an application can do that. We do ask for a signature from the chair, and that's really so that there's, we have got an understanding that at that governance level, there's recognition that this fund is being applied for. But I can't imagine that any organisation wouldn't be doing it without their chair knowing about it. So we do ask that whoever it is that's applying it makes the signs, and then the chairperson signs. And we do the same for our Helping Hands grants as well. That's because in the past we've had 2 applications from the same organisation in the same FY because they haven't, you know, talked to one another.
Left hand and the right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just thinking about that timing issue again, what's the time frame for a project or for a piece of work that's being covered by this grant? Does it have to be a 12-month or a longer or a shorter, or how does that work?
Yeah, well, like I say, we will be requiring a report at 6 months and then at 12 months after you've made application. So should it be, yeah, we would be anticipating that whatever it is that you've applied for is achieved within that 12 months period.
And will they get all the money up front?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to be reasonably simple like that.
Yeah. One application, and then once that's been approved and the contract signed, the invoice is paid. Yeah.
Okay. So in a lot of the other COVID-related funding, there's been a big emphasis on transparency. Will you be making public the allocations to whom and how much?
Yes, we will. We'll be listing them on our website.
Good.
And also supplying that information through to Ministry for Culture and Heritage, Manatū Taonga. Yeah.
Excellent. I've run out of questions, and we've run out of questions on the chat, so do add any others. And Sebastian has already answered one about other funds that are coming through, and there's been a little bit about the lotteries funding, which has been announced today, which seems to be an increase to the existing funding, from what I can understand. Sebastian, would you be able to just give us a very brief update on the other funds that the Ministry is looking after and what we can expect to hear about those in September?
Sure, thanks, Philippa. Yes, I think it's important to recognise that the Museum Hardship Fund is just one of the initiatives that the museum and gallery sector will benefit from in the package of new initiatives that is coming through MCH, which is great because, as Victoria said, this is a neat, it's a nice word for it, neat small fund, and I think it will be a really great opportunity for the museum and gallery sector to access some of the funds from the larger initiatives that are coming through, which focus on innovation, capability, and projects that emphasise access and participation and employment within the sector. Those larger funds are still in the process of having their policies kind of developed, and the intention is to have a sort of sector engagement on those larger funds within September. And I understand that there'll also be a focused session in one of these Friday Zui that MA and NSTP convene. So there will be some really good opportunities to engage and input into some of those larger funds, which will also make a big difference.
Yes, we're hoping that there might be some quite big cross-sector opportunities arising out of those funds, which I'm personally quietly excited about. Just going back to the Museum Hardship Fund, there's a question here: can the grant under the Museum Hardship Fund be for a portion of some bigger project? And Victoria, I'm sorry, I muted you before.
Oh, that's all right. I unmuted myself. Yes.
Oh, that was a quick answer. And when do you anticipate the information being available?
Well, I'm sweet talking the web person at the moment. I've written all of the information, and he's hoping to have it up as a test site by Monday, and I'm hoping that it's live by Wednesday. And then the fund will open, like I say, Thursday or Friday. So if we can get it done quicker, we will. But that's the time frame that I'm working to.
Excellent. So we're looking at the end of September for the closing of the first round then?
Yeah.
Okay. And so you mentioned an external group making the decisions. Obviously, we don't need to know who's on that group because that wouldn't be sensible. But it's quite a big responsibility for that group.
Yes, it is. I think they're up for it. I've asked people who I have a great deal of respect for, but also they're not in a position where they can directly, benefit from funding. So there's no potential conflict of interest for any of them, and they also represent quite neatly a great, range of interests as well. So what we've asked of that group, and I'll be still developing the terms of reference for them, is that they'll be making recommendations on the funding. The final sign-off will lie with National Services to Paerangi, and then through to the Ministry for Culture and Heritage to make sure that we've adhered to everything that we've said that we were going to. So I don't anticipate that we would go against what that group recommends, though. Yeah. There's some very brainy, amazing people out in the sector.
Excellent. I'm just wondering if there are any other questions. I made a few notes and have definitely answered all the ones that I've got noted. I would refer people in terms of other funding opportunities that there are available. We've listed most of them on the MA COVID-19 page on our website. For instance, the business advisory through Qualmark and tourism avenues, and those who are involved with the Creative New Zealand supported funding will be aware of those as well. So unless there are any other questions.
Oh, I just see that there's one from Jane about whether it will be a contract with MCH or NSTP or be with Te Papa.
There it is. Yep.
Because it'll be because we'll be the ones administering the money. So yeah.
Yes. And Sebastian, do you have anything else that you want to add at this point?
No, I think that's all. I'm just recognising that Lucinda's asked a question about whether there'll be an email announcement when the fund is open, and I can answer that one if that's all right. So yes, there will be, and there'll be a release that will be shared as well. So yeah, we'll make sure that everyone is aware of the opening date.
Yes, I'm sure we'll all make sure that that's well publicised.
Yeah.
Victoria, anything else that you want to add?
I just see that Darren is there. Hi, Darren. Service museums will also be included within this fund.
Excellent. I think that's been very helpful just to give an overview of what's happening, to get an idea of what it will cover, which seems to me to be fairly broad, and to know that to know what the upper limit of the grants available is really important, so that people can start thinking about how it might help them to really get through this next while. I'm particularly interested in the fact that it is available over 2 years, and that means that it may really help some of these organisations to get through the uncertainty of the next while, and that after the next 2 years they're still here and still operating with the capacity to keep doing their important mahi. So I think this is going to be an opportunity to really help a particular area of need. I also note that there is plenty of advice available from Victoria and her team, and do encourage people who are thinking of applying to just think about it over the next week, and then when the material and the information comes out from National Services Te Paerangi, to talk to your development advisor and really talk through how it will be best applied to your own situation. So I really want to thank you, Victoria, for all your work getting this over the line, and Sebastian for all your advice and support as well, and we'll look forward to working with you further on this and the other funds that are coming up, and probably see you, Sebastian, again at our hui in September when we start talking about the other funds as well. So thank you everybody for attending this afternoon, and I hope the sun is shining in your rohi for a nice weekend. Personally, I'm heading to Hawke's Bay. Sorry for those in the Auckland region and Northland who aren't able to go anywhere, and wish you all the very best, and we'll see you again too soon. Ka kite